Most organizations don't struggle because leaders lack intelligence. They struggle because the conversations happening publicly are often different from the conversations happening privately. And by the time culture issues, succession problems, or strategic misalignment become visible, the warning signs have usually been there for much longer. Today, we're exploring what experienced leaders see beneath the surface and what organizations often miss until the consequences become impossible to ignore. Welcome to Deals with Heels. I'm Debra, your host, and this is where we go beyond the surface level of business, leadership, and sales and into the real decisions that shape how we grow. Today, I'm joined by Liz Weber. Liz is an executive advisor, leadership strategist, board consultant, author, and one of the world's leading voices on organizational leadership and change. With more than 3 decades of experience working alongside executives, leadership teams, and boards across industries and around the world, she brings unique perspective on what actually happens inside organizations when important decisions are being made. Named a top global guru of leadership, Liz has spent her career helping organizations navigate growth, succession, accountability, and change while keeping a close eye on the human dynamics that often undermine whether strategy succeeds or fails. Liz, welcome to the show.
Debra, thank you. I'm so excited to join you for our conversation.
I am too. I got a little tongue-tied with all of your fantastic qualifications, and I'm so excited to have you on the show. You have such great experience, and I really want to dive deep into that. I want to take just a few minutes, though, and talk a little bit about you and kind of your favorite part of what you do.
Well, the favorite part of what I do is when I'm able to help one of my clients, and for your listeners, Debra, my clients are typically executives, ownership teams, or boards of directors. When I can help my clients separate their emotional baggage and biases from the truly objective black and white issue that's in front of them. And that's very easy for me to say, but it's quite often very hard to do because my clients are working with their team members, they're working with their colleagues, they're reporting to their board of directors, they're talking to their stakeholders, and there are relationships that are there. So that's where it gets hard for them. But the favorite part of what I bring to our conversations is helping them understand the non-emotional realities of what they're dealing with, and then helping them find the words to communicate a path forward with their teams or their boards or their stakeholders, customers, whoever it might be.
That's awesome. So many people need that. And I think, and it was very true in my own case, when like I was functioning, I was doing all of the things, and from the outside, it looked like I had everything together. But there were decisions that were difficult for me to make, and I was in functional freeze when it came to that decision. I couldn't make it either because I didn't want the repercussions to hit other people, or I was fearful of how I was going to do it. Whatever was causing me to fall, and my subconscious would take control. And then I actually couldn't make a decision. And so being able to pop out and find clarity again, and okay, now I'm capable of making that decision. Let's fine tune it. Let's look at it. How can I do it? And I think often where people miss the point when, for example, they're having to lay somebody off, having to make reorganizational changes to their company because that's what's best for the company, it hurts. It violates our personal values. And finding a way to move forward with the humans that we have still on our team is so critically important. And there really is kind of a gap in people doing that. Do you see that as well?
All the time. And it doesn't matter how long an individual has been in a leadership role, or if they are the owner of the company, or if they're a fairly new supervisor. It hurts. It's hard. As you were just sharing the scenario of, possibly having to do a layoff, what flashed through my mind was a couple years ago, privately held small company locally to me here, they were for the first time in their 45-year history facing the potential of a layoff. And
Ooh,
the
45 years without doing it.
yeah,
That's a tough obstacle to face.
yeah, and the owner of the company, by many people was viewed as a real hard-nosed guy. He had taken over the firm from his dad when his dad had died unexpectedly, and he was a real go-getter, and a lot of people thought he was just very, very hard. But he and I were having a conversation, and the decision to potentially lay off staff was gut-wrenching for him, and he said, "Liz, I'm gonna run into these people at the grocery store. I'm gonna go
Mm.
past these people pushing their carts, figuring out how they're gonna pay for groceries, or I'm gonna be pumping gas, across from them at the gas station." And so, this hurts. And I will just tell you, in that scenario, what he chose to do instead of laying people off was, totally passed his salary up and then did a tiered salary reduction down through the management ranks so that frontline staff would not be impacted. But, these decisions, they hurt, and there are emotions involved with them.
So he kind of chose to save those frontline staff members that were going to be gone, which, you know, they're the people they're the team members that talk to your customer. They're the ones that build demand. They're the
Mhm.
ones that really have a critical role in the sales and the growth cycle. And and people don't realize that how much their experience matters. So I'd love to know how it turned out for him. I hate that he had to cut his pay and leadership pay, and hopefully that will rebound and he'll be able to give it back to them. But I completely understand his rationale, and I think that it is smart because for me, I'm a sales marketing growth specialist, and so oftentimes I may be the third or fourth agency that they're talking to about their marketing or their sales. And the agencies that were there before me were really good too. And so there's a deeper issue other than just in this one sales cycle, right, that your salespeople do. Your frontline personnel, your fulfillment people, all of your team members working cohesive to build demand, really important demand for your business. So I think it's smart that he did that.
Yeah, it actually it turned out okay. I won't say well, but they recovered, they rebounded, and more than anything, I think, to what you're alluding to also, it was a real strong demonstration to the entire workforce and to the community that the ownership and leadership team was very well aware of the impact on the community if they would lay off frontline team members. And it was not easy for some members of the leadership team, but as the owner shared with them, we're not as directly impacted living paycheck to paycheck as a lot of our frontline people are. So we will learn to take this hit and move forward. So yeah, it was a something they had to deal with, but they've done okay.
And really believing in his community. And that kind of leadership, man, it builds so much trust and confidence that his community probably stood behind him.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I love that a lot. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the mindset that leaders are in. You can totally hear his mindset and his ethics went, he held them higher than he did his profits. I think that's a rare thing for somebody to have. What are leaders privately worried about today that they aren't openly talking about?
That's a hard question for me to answer because quite often they're talking to me about things they're not talking to other people about. So I'm not exactly sure sometimes as to what they're communicating with others, unless I'm part of the messaging team. But what I will tell you, what my client base is focused on right now, and my clients, again, being executives, owners, and boards. To be honest, Deborah, many of them they're at a point where Things have been chaotic for so many years now, starting with COVID. Just, dramatic change in how business is done, dramatic expectations from the workforce, from technology, from the political and societal challenges. Everything has just kind of kept building. And for my clients who are not yet ready to retire, not yet ready to sell their business, not ready to, pull the plug and say, I'm out of here. They are done with dealing with unacceptable behavior, unacceptable performance, and unacceptable attitudes. And how that is manifesting itself with them is it sounds really odd to some, but I am having this conversation with probably 90% of my client base right now is re-educating the workforce that they have as to what the full scope of their job responsibilities are, whether they are remote, hybrid, or in person. What is expected of them for the pay that they are being paid? What is expected of them as far as contributing and supporting the culture versus having this perspective that I have a right to say and do whatever I want for my you know, presence in the workforce. And it kind of goes back to what we started this conversation around, where one of the things that I am adamant about, because another huge part of the work that I do with my clients is on strategic planning. And for you and your listeners that are familiar with that, some of the foundation pieces of a strategic plan are an organization's vision, mission, and values. And I call those the part of the cultural framework because it really speaks to who you are as an organization, the pace at which you choose to work, and the type of work that you do. And those three components also start to provide a description of the type of individuals who will be successful when they work with you, and the type of people who are not going to be successful in your type of environment and culture. And so I say all that because with a lot of my clients right now and the challenges that they're facing, they're having to re-educate themselves and their team members on, hey, we need to take a step back and remind ourselves as to our mission. What are we here to do? What are we here to provide, or what are we here to produce and support and distribute? What are we trying to accomplish? What pace are we supposed to be working at? What are our goals? What are our milestones? What are the expectations? And then what are our values? And by those, I call those the house rules. What are the behaviors that are expected of each and every one of us, regardless of position, as long as we're taking a paycheck from this organization or are representing this organization? And by taking that paycheck, by default, you are agreeing to abide by these values. To be honest, Deborah, the values are typically nothing outrageous. It's things like share knowledge, be courteous, think deep, do the full scope of your job. It's a lot of basic expectations, quote unquote basic. But the problem is that for many of my organizations, my clients, many of the organizations, managers have not done a good job of holding team members accountable to the values because they confuse being accountable with being mean. Instead of being accountable is being candid and forthright and helping team members understand what's expected of you for the pay that you're being paid, and here are the framework, the values within which you need to work. So all of that being said is a lot of my clients right now are realizing it doesn't look like any time in the near future things are going to calm down. The cycle of busyness, the cycle of technology changes, the impact of AI, the political and societal challenges, they're going to be with us for a while. So, what we need to do as leaders within our organizations and our zone of influence is we need to kind of reset the expectations and get real clear with our team members and with our leadership teams and with our boards. As long as we're working together, here's how we need to behave, here's how we need to interact, and here's how we need to perform if we're going to perform and succeed successfully. So it's kind of a recalibration time for some of my clients as they continue to do the work that they need to do day in and day out.
I am seeing something really similar to that with my clients as well. And this really all of the big changes, implementation of AI, re-automating different functions. And I think COVID also gave people a look at Are you paying for the work or are you paying for the time?
Mm.
And the people that were working at home that understood they're paying me for this work, well, they built extra time, right?
Mhm.
And I think that leaders sometimes, and really the workforce in general, have been conditioned that we're trading our time for dollars. And now it's the accountability for the work that
Mhm.
really, really matters. And I had a client and he was really focused on getting everyone back in the office. This was shortly after COVID, maybe in 2022 or 2023 even. And we were having a discussion about, I understand how important collaboration is and help me understand the departments and why you want them back. And he wasn't very good at explaining it, right? He just wanted them back. And it took me a while to get him. And then almost exasperatedly, he said, "Well, how do I know they're working?" Well, is the work getting done? Are you paying for the work or are you paying for their butts in a chair? Because that's different. That's two different things. And when you pay people for the work gets done because that they have a good, clear understanding of what their requirements are. And when I see it, I'm looking often at sales culture because like you said, we're all here. The company exists for one thing. What are we doing? We're selling this product or service and we're excited about it. We're excited, enthusiastic about how it helps people. It helps businesses, all of the things. And often the sales culture to a business owner or a leader exists in the sales department. It's how the sales department conducts itself. And that's such a limited way of looking at a company's growth because each person that works there has a vital role in the company achieving its goal of providing that product or service and selling it. And I have found that with work, when we sit down and we're talking to even a payroll person, a person that's a receptionist, somebody in fulfillment or the warehouse, it didn't matter where they were, when they understood how important it was, their little piece of that growth cycle without you and this part of it, the whole thing doesn't work. Now they understand how important they are, how critical their job is, and how they fit into the sales role without being terrified of sales. One of the presentations that I give is called Sales is Not a Dirty Word. It's what we're all here to do is to grow this business, but no one wants to admit that I have a role in the growth of the company. And this is what my little role is. And often it's so important in building demand and increasing the number of people that want what you have. You can do it without advertising. Oftentimes, if your team understands their role everywhere, they feel so empowered by it. Do you find that as well?
Oh, absolutely. As you're talking, my mind flashed to a couple years ago. I was working with a community bank, and we had we had gone through revising their values and mission, and the bank needed to turn its numbers around, and they needed to improve their bottom line. And so it became imperative that not only the people in commercial and residential lending, but also the frontline tellers get better at sales. And Deborah, the tellers almost were apoplectic. It was like, we don't do sales. Oh my God, we're customer service. We don't do sales. And we did a whole series of training programs to exactly your point that you more than anybody are the face of this bank. Again, a local community bank, several branches. But for a lot of the older residents in the community, they come into the bank and they will talk to you about their wallpaper selections. They will talk with you about their grandchildren. They will show you pictures of their kids because you've been servicing their family for 3 or 4 generations. So they have a relationship with you, and it's a matter of identifying the role that you have in making their life easier. It's just not cashing a paycheck or helping them balance a credit card receipt or whatever it might be. It's also listening to them when they're complaining about their roof leaking, and you say, "Hey, would you like to talk with one of our lenders? I know you probably don't want a home equity loan, but if you need to get your roof fixed, that might be a way that they could help you finance that." That's helping them. That's also sales. And it was a matter of helping them understand that their role is important in understanding the needs of their customer and the services the bank could match them with. Because as I told them during training, nobody wants a home equity loan, but a lot of people want a pool or a new roof or addition or a new air conditioning unit or whatever they might need. And a home equity loan might be a vehicle to make that happen. A lot of it is understanding how your role fits into the bigger picture, and also that's not easy for a lot of managers to explain to staff. I
No,
wanna go
it's not.
I wanna go back to what you said earlier because quite often, for many employees, they're like, "Well, we're not sales. Sales just, if they sell X number of widgets or if they bring X number of dollars, they've made their number. It's easy to track that." To your example, I'm in payroll or I'm in customer service. I don't have things like that. Well, your manager then hasn't done a good job in helping you explain what the deliverables are for the role you're in. What should you be expected to do, to produce, to perform, to your point, Deborah, given your role? You may not be selling widgets, but you might be producing a certain number of widgets, or you might be reducing waste, or you might be helping to improve throughput and reconciliation time for payroll. Whatever. There are metrics in every position. It's up to your manager or supervisor to help identify what those are. And that's not easy for a lot of them to do.
It's not. I don't think they understand what their role, even as a leader, is. And I find, and I think this is really in my industry and marketing, especially, has become very segmented, and that's not bad. Specialized isn't bad. Having expertise isn't bad. But when you're separated from it. And now it doesn't work as one big whole marketing cohesive plan. The thing that I've seen is, and I'll refer back to it again, is building demand. And the people that do that best are the people that aren't in sales roles. And when they do it great, then when the salesperson is in the sales role and he sits down to make that sale, then demand is built. And so it's easy. He's having
Yeah.
a conversation about a specific set of things to close that deal. If demand hasn't been built, now when he sits down, they don't trust them already. They don't have any of that customer confidence that they need to have. And so that salesperson has to build demand in the sales call. And so he has 13 different things to try to explain to you and to teach you in an hour's time so that he can complete his job, which is to get the sale. And that's overwhelming. That's a lot of information coming at somebody at one time. And it feels like sales pressure. And
Mhm.
he feels like he's pressuring people and he's not getting good feedback in that sales chair. And so all of that gets really hyper focused. And now you're being salesy. I don't want to be salesy. And in fact, there's no high pressure sales tactics being used at all. They just are trying to build demand during a sales call because it's not being built in this part of your natural day-to-day business with team experience and with customer experience and fulfillment, and making sure all of that happens. Now your marketing becomes easier. Your branding becomes more effective. Your demand building advertising builds more effective, and your salesperson's job is so much easier. So much easier.
And you don't have the hostilities between departments.
No, you don't. They're all working together as a team. It's so incredibly important. And I haven't met with a business in the last probably 5 years that's doing it well.
Mhm.
They're coming because sales is where you feel the of everything that's happening in your whole company. You don't pay attention to it. Those people knew that something was wrong when they were talking to customers. They knew something was up. Team members, their managers knew they're not motivated. They're disenfranchised, but it doesn't get made a priority until it hits sales and revenue. Now everybody's focused on it and they try to fix it really within that one container, but it is systemic in my experience.
Well, and Deborah, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. That's one of the reasons when I'm working with my clients and, like yours, honestly, they would all like all their employees back in the office because it makes their life easier.
Mhm.
Because number one, they can interact with people, they can see people, but it's easier to call impromptu meetings very quickly that way as well. And I can tell you, when I work with a team and we're in person, I can get so much more done in an hour than I can on a virtual scenario in a virtual setting. All that to say that to exactly what you're talking about, when there are cross-functional challenges or business-wide challenges, when you are in person or you are using your in-person time wise, those are the types of meetings and conversations that you should be having when you've got people in the office together and where you need to be really intentional about when you are scheduling in-person time in the office. And you shouldn't be like one of my clients I found out about, and I had a conversation with them. They were requiring people to come in the office, so people were coming in the office and would just go into their office or into a cube and shut the door if they had a door and just work there privately and weren't meeting. When you are physically co-located, that's when you should be having the conversations in person, candidly, about, "Deborah, we know your sales numbers were down last month, and a big part of that was because our portal was locking people out and causing frustration, so you were dealing with those complaints when you were on your renewal calls and blah, 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 blah." And it's being able to have those types of conversations in person, candidly, to address issues. And I'll just say in there also, one of the other things that I'm working with my clients on is helping many of them learn the skill about having candid conversations about operational challenges or systemic challenges within the organization, that you can raise the issues and team members do not get personally offended and shut down. They need to learn to stay engaged, to talk about the real issues and solve problems. And that is a very real skill set that I'm working with a lot of my clients on right now, is stop allowing the turf wars to start flaring up because someone was personally offended because somebody in a different department complained about your department and something that it did. Let's learn to find out what the problem was. Is it a legitimate issue? How do we solve it and how do we prevent it from happening again? And then how do we move forward?
Without it being such a us against them. We're all in
Exactly.
this one growth boat together. Now, let's figure out how it works. And the portal problem's happening, then support the portal people. Work together to solve
Right.
the problem until it's fixed. Boy, when I was in corporate America, when that worked, when we came together to solve a problem, it got solved so much faster
Hmm.
than the conflict and the
Yeah.
butting heads and the blame. There's so much blame. Blame everybody else.
Yeah.
And it can be so rampant. And I was not great at navigating through that. I was successful in corporate world because I was very good at what I did, but I
Hmm.
was not always great. I was great at being honest and forthright and clear, but the manipulation behind the scenes and the politicking, I didn't have a stomach for. And it was really hard for me to do that. And being able, as a leader in that organization, to fix it, to set a good example, to have that is fantastic. And teaching people to do that is incredibly important. I have another question I want to ask you. How do leaders know when the real problem isn't performance, but it's avoidance? Like avoiding big conversations that if you had that conversation, it would help performance, but we're not having it. We're just focused on this executional performance.
Well, that whole issue is really intertwined with a lot of the work that I do with my clients, because a lot of my clients, we meet once a month, and usually there's some issues that we carry forward, but quite often it's like, Deborah, what can I help you with this month? And it's the issue of the month, and it's typically, quite often, to be honest, it's a personnel issue. of how do I deal with this person, or how do I convey this to the board, or how do I say this to the company, those types of things. And one of the common themes is I have the Deborah issue again. I've got the Deborah issue, and blah 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 blah. And a question I will ask is, have you talked with her? And quite often it's no. I'm sick of her. I'm tired of her. I'm tired of dealing with it. And then my conversation is, well, you're just continuing to allow the behavior to continue, and what you are condoning that type of behavior without making her aware of it. So either she's not aware because you haven't said anything and therefore she thinks it's right, or, you're just allowing the rest of your team to see you avoid her.
Yes,
So
and
pick
the
your
total
poison.
lack of resonance, right? You're not yes. I have seen that happen a couple of times as well. And I was coaching an individual and she was struggling, and her supervisor, her boss, the owner of the company, told her he didn't trust her. And he gave like, well, this person I've known this long, and this person were the examples. And I said, if somebody said that to me and I didn't understand why, I said, I think the question is, can you give me an example of something I'm doing that's preventing you from building trust with me? And getting very specific. I find that type of leadership very passive aggressive. Like I'm
Mhm.
somehow supposed to just know from the tone of your voice, or because I sent you a job opportunity with another company, I'm supposed to understand that I'm upset with your performance, as opposed to just saying it. And he took the time to say, well, I just don't trust you.
Mhm.
Well, what is that? That's so vague. What exactly does that
Right.
mean?
Right.
And for her, that was very liberating to think, oh, I can ask that question.
Mhm.
She was just trying, and they would get in disagreements. They
Mhm.
were pretty close, and they would get in disagreements and flat out arguments.
Mhm.
But his response was always, well, I don't trust you. So when she pinned him down, I said, because obviously there's a disconnect. You think
Mhm.
you're doing everything right. You're getting good feedback from the team, which you're probably going to get, or you're not going to get any. They're not going to come and complain about what you're doing. They're going to go around you. So somewhere in there, there's a disconnect that you
Mhm.
don't see. And I wouldn't let my supervisor or my boss get away with such a vague general statement about trust, because unless you're stealing and you're right, there's levels of trust. So what
Mhm.
specifically about my performance is not building trust? What can I do better in my
Mhm.
day to day to help you trust my decision making?
Mhm.
And that made huge differences in her
Mhm.
relationship with him. She got promoted, and now they are able, because she feels comfortable asking the question. Like she didn't have permission to ask it. She didn't
Mhm.
feel like I need to question and ask specifics. And just that one change was very meaningful for her.
Mhm.
And so I think both sides, there's accountability there for the leader to be clear and transparent. And if you're an employee, and leaders are employees too, they have
Mhm.
bosses, and you're not clear exactly what those expectations are, ask.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I will, I think that was great advice to your client, because when I'm working with leaders and, if a leader said, well, I just don't trust her. My question to them is specifically, what in her role, or what is she demonstrating that causes you to not trust her ability or her capability of doing the job? And just that word specifically, they're like, well, she's not a team player. That's still too vague.
Mm,
That's this big. What is she doing, or what is she saying that is causing you to say now that she's not a team player and therefore you don't trust her? And quite often, Deborah, it is something so minor that just triggers them,
yes, it'll
you
be
know?
one little thing, and that easily
Yeah.
easily modifiable, and that it's stuck in their craw, like my
Yeah.
grandma used to say.
Yeah.
And now they can't get that out, and it shades everything that that employee does now,
Right.
because it's got this overall thing. They did this one thing, and now I don't trust them.
Mhm.
And now they can't see beyond it either.
Right.
And so her asking the question, because he does like her and
Mhm.
and respect her to a certain extent, and there are things that she's doing very well that he did communicate to her.
Mhm.
But then to come back and say, well, I just don't see you moving forward because I don't trust you was like out of left field for her.
Right.
And pinning him down, there were specific things that she had done
Mhm.
and that led to decisions that weren't the best decisions for the company. Then, so, but you learn.
Mhm.
You learn, you come back, you teach. It's a teachable moment. And I think leaders forget that part of their role. They just expect, I've got these people, they're experts in their field. Here they go. I don't need to worry about them anymore. It just doesn't work. It's not that simple for me.
It's not that simple, and I'm glad you said that because, I've had a lot of clients go, "Liz, but they're executives, they should know better." And I have to tell my client, "But this is the first time they've worked for you. You're different than every other boss they've had. You might be more laissez-faire. You might be more controlling. You might have higher expectations. You might be more communicative. You might be more distant. So just because they're an executive doesn't mean that they know how you want them to do the job that you hired them to do." And that in and of itself is like, "Oh, wow." And it causes quite often my client and I then to have a conversation. So how are you doing in your role? As a CEO or the president, whatever. What might we tighten up what you're doing so that your entire team has better clarity of what you need of them and expect of them to perform? I mean, I'm doing this with a couple clients right now. I mean, it's going to sound really basic to a lot of your listeners, but I'm working with a couple executive teams right now to teach the executives how to communicate as executives. Meaning, when you email one another or when you send a Teams message, how do you structure that? I've got a couple clients right now, when they email one another, it's like they give a book report. I mean, it's just blah, 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 blah.
Oh,
And then,
word vomit.
a word vomit, and then it's request is buried someplace in there. So, you get an email, it's like, oh my God, I'm not going to read that. And then you have hostility among team members because nobody responds to each other's emails because they get these word vomit emails all over the place.
And I'm
So
not
just
big. If somebody sends me a Steinbeck novel and it can't get to the point, then I lose attention. I really
yeah,
do. It's hard for me
yeah,
to go through all of it without understanding why I'm doing it really clearly off the very first steps.
yeah,
This is why I'm sending the email.
right.
So, and now
Yeah,
I have that clear understanding, but they've really lost touch with communicating and really keeping everybody clear. And it's difficult. It's difficult for them. What
yeah.
do you, for the leader that's listening who senses something's off in their organization, but they can't quite put their finger on it, what should they pay attention to first?
That's a big question. And where my mind is going is what I've said a number of times. If you think something's off, number one, it probably is. And quite often, you know what it is. And you just need to have that conversation with that individual or those individuals and address the issue. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Stop procrastinating and start digging. Because you may, if you don't know, you have an inkling. And it's better to do some investigative work and figure out if your hunch was in fact true, that this is what's driving things being off. And it's better to do that sooner rather than later. Because I can speak from my experience. I had a team member many years ago that was great, but then something was just off, and he just became a bit distant and wasn't as communicative, wasn't as responsive, and deadlines started getting missed. And come to find out, he was going through a really nasty divorce, and I had no idea. And I was continuing to throw work his way, and the details of his divorce obviously were none of my business, but if I had taken the time to dig a little bit and find out where he was emotionally and financially and everything else, it would have been better for us and for his team to have me get a better understanding of where he was emotionally and psychologically at the time.
Yes, as
So,
in you can step in, provide support
mhm,
when he needs it because he
right.
needs it in that specific time just to help hold his feet together because he probably emotionally was so off it was hard for him to focus and trying for you not to notice knowing he's not doing a good job,
Mhm.
losing all of his own confidence. So communication is such an important issue. Well, we have talked so much, so such a like-minded conversation. I really enjoyed it. We're coming to the end of our time, and I definitely want to give my audience information on how they can find out more about you and your services and all the great work that you're doing. And so tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if your listeners are interested in following me, connecting with me, I am most active on LinkedIn, and my handle on LinkedIn is at Liz Weber CMC, and Weber has one B. Or they are welcome to go to my website, which is wbsllc.com. That stands for Weber Business Services LC.com.
And I will link to all of those things in the show notes, of course. And if this conversation resonated with you, if it challenged how you think about leadership, decision making, or what may be happening beneath the surface of your organization, then my work lives beyond this podcast in your growth. Thank you. I help businesses and business owners and leadership teams identify what's actually creating friction in their growth, because the visible problem is often only the symptom. Whether it's sales pressure, customer experience challenges, leadership alignment, culture strain, or organizational misalignment, growth breaks in the connections between the systems. If you're wondering whether some of the warning signs we discussed today might already be showing up in your organization, I have a free resource called 5 Signs Your Growth is Breaking, and I will link to it in the show notes as well. It will help you identify early indicators of growth friction before they become larger organizational problems. Liz, thank you so much for all of your valuable insights, such great wisdom.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Deborah. Thank you for having me join you today.
It was definitely a pleasure having you on the show. Until next time, everyone, stand strong in your power, especially when it gets uncomfortable. See you next week.